Well, good morning. Welcome back. I don't know if you could see anything different with the truck, but we took the canopy off. Go out for a little drive. Definitely not a cold start. Been driving it around today. So we're going to jump into today's video. Today is going to be on some of the main failure points on a 6-liter Powerstroke. This engine does have a really bad reputation, but I think it stems from a lot of people not knowing what they're doing or how to work on them, number one, or how to maintain them, because I jumped into the diesel world in a 6.0. It was a lot to learn, but it's also very fruitful because these engines are great. They are practically race engines if you know what you're doing. They're one of the only production diesels that do not have a red line on their tachometer. That should tell you something. That Ford and Navistar and all them were pretty confident in this engine with how it can perform. One of the main failure points on these, which we'll get into later in this video, were the emission systems that were on this truck. They kind of killed it. But we're going to hop in the truck right now. We got to go put diesel in it. Maybe grab an energy drink from the gas station to get this day going. And we're going to have a special guest today. We're going to have my wife in the car with us. And let's hop into the vlog, guys. Diesel's actually not too bad down here in Florida. With my 10 cents off a gallon, we are sitting at a whopping $3.73 a gallon. Well, as I was talking about previously, or a few seconds ago, we are going to be talking about some of the problems and the stigma that the 6.0 has, and really ways to combat it and how you can make it one of the more reliable diesels on the market. You are going to have your issues that you run into, or you're going to have to fix things because it's a 20-year-old diesel. You know, you're driving a 20-year-old truck if you drive a 6.0. Even more if it's a 7.3, 25, 30 years old. So, figure we get this day started off right. A little drive. Maybe do a couple little street hits, see what this thing's got in her. Maybe we can blow the tires off the back and, but first we have to spend all of our money. People hate the 6.0. People think it has like the worst reputation of any diesel out there, and I'll give it does have its flaws, but maintenance is key. And I will say one thing that I've always lived by for 6.0s is cleanliness is next to godliness for these. You have to be clean when you work on them. If not, it's gonna ruin your day. We can also get into additives and stuff that I use when filling up that helps these HEUI injectors immensely. Boom. Hellcat. There was a Hellcat. But $75 for 20 gallons, that ain't bad. I don't think many of you know who's sitting next to me, but that is my lovely wife. Like I was saying, most of you haven't met her other than our road trip vlog, but this is my lovely wife. She's been out of the camera for a while, but one of my biggest supporters.
Yes.
And it's kind of weird because I feel awkward like vlogging in front of her, or in front of anybody for that matter. That's why I usually stick to my garage. But
doing great, honey.
Also, I haven't told the channel, but videos are probably going to be pretty slow coming soon because I'm going to be a dad.
Yes.
And that's pretty insane. She's given me a lovely child.
A baby girl.
Yeah, we are going to have a baby girl. So that's very exciting. But I kind of want to get your take, since you're in the video right now.
I love your truck. Oops.
So yeah, I want to get your take and see, pretty much just tell them how much like crap my friends talk on having a 6-liter Powerstroke, and pretty much the amount of work that I put in to make it as good as it is. I guess.
I love your truck.
Yeah.
And the friend that sold you this car is now looking for the exact same truck
Pretty much, yeah.
and wants this truck back.
He did ask if he could have it back. I said no.
Maintain it.
Yeah. I mean, maintenance is
Well,
key on these things.
Not a lot to maintain it. It's like a normal truck,
Yeah.
but runs great. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, for the mileage that's on it, it's only 108,000 miles, almost 109. I have an oil change coming up in 1,000 miles, but yeah, I think one of the biggest things though is maintenance is key on these engines, and like I said at the gas pumps, cleanliness is next to godliness with these things. If you keep them clean, you're gonna not have any wire gremlins. You're not gonna have any issues in that realm. But
Just gotta keep up with it.
yeah,
She will stay loyal.
she is a loyal little girl. But what is your take on how it looks now compared to when I bought it?
How it looks?
Yeah, like the stuff that I've done from the day that I bought it to how it looks now.
It looks prettier.
It is prettier. Kind of what I'm alluding to, I don't know if you guys know, but this truck used to be on an 8-inch lift on 37s, and it was an absolute terror to drive.
Oh my god, it drove terrible. Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Had horrible death wobble in the steering wheel. The steering was so loose.
It was so stiff.
Yeah,
It was uncomfortable.
yeah.
When you took it off that lift, it looked so much better. It wasn't obnoxious anymore.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
yeah. It's been a while. It's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
But with all that being said, I think we're going to get back to the house, and then we'll start diving into the main purpose of this video.
Supra!
There is a Supra. Is that a Supra? But we'll dive into the main purpose of this video, which is going to be the main problems with the 6.0, and really just ways and things you can buy to combat those issues and make this one of the more reliable diesels on the market, to include nowadays even. Like I said, 6.0s have a plethora of issues, but all of them can be fixed. So it's really all about how deep into it you want to go. So I have about 5 things listed here that I want to read off to you guys. And these aren't all of the issues, so I'm going to get it out there in front. These aren't all of them, but these are some of the major ones that can cause deeper underlying issues, if that makes sense. So let's start off with the oil cooler on these trucks. And the oil cooler is not the problem. The oil cooler is not the problem. The problem is when these engines were made and they were casted, since they are a cast iron block, they're casted in sand. And Ford, Navistar, whoever, International, they didn't clean the blocks like to the best of their ability, right? So there is some casting sand left over in these, and this can be combated a couple different ways. You can put on a bypass coolant filtration kit, and that'll help clean 10% of your coolant constantly, and it could help get all of the sand out, and then you won't have an issue of your oil cooler clogging. You can also put on a full flow coolant filter that is made by like IPR, I believe makes one. Your bypass filters from like Mishimoto or Extreme Diesel Performance or anything like that, that will help. What I did is I got rid of the liquid to liquid oil cooler from the Valley, and I went to a Bulletproof Diesel air to oil cooler kit with it relocates the oil cooler to the front, so it's like a big intercooler for the oil cooler. How normal cars nowadays cooler oil, not necessarily diesels, but other like gas cars. And also it relocates the filter, so you have a better filter. It's a bigger filter capacity as well, so you can filter more oil and without causing any flow restrictions at a smaller micron. But that's what I did to combat that. And I'll throw a picture on the screen of what a clogged oil cooler looks like, clogged with casting sand. Also, it's just easier down in Florida for me to have a air to oil cooler kit. It may not be the best option for you. So look into those different options. You can also do an oil cooler relocation that still uses liquid to liquid cooling. It cools your oil by your coolant, but it's just on like the side near your battery box, so you don't have to dig into the motor every time you want to change your oil cooler. But I just opted to never have to change my oil cooler again. So just take the coolant out of the system, and then the truck will live a long, happy life. These trucks do like to run hotter as well, so they run more efficiently with hotter oil. Not necessarily 250 degrees, but my truck runs pretty consistent at around, in the hot summer, 210, 215. In the cooler times, it's around 185, 195. And that's where I see less efficiency out of it, is it doesn't stay hot enough. It's still hot, but not hot enough to, be as efficient as possible. So take that with a grain of salt. Do with that what you will. One of the second biggest issues on the earlier model 6.0s are your HPOPs. Their HPOPs are weaker. That's like 03, 04 on the 6.0s. But on the later model 6.0s, like 05 to 7, 04.5 to 07, they have good HPOPs and they rarely ever fail. But they did have a pretty, the SDC fitting on them failed, like the O-rings around them failed. So do an updated fitting with updated O-rings and all that, and have a better flow of high pressure out of your HPOP. So keep that in mind. So really just that's number 2 is your HPOP. So just take care of your oil and your HPOP will be fine. You ever let that reservoir get completely empty, like that low pressure feeds that HPOP, and it can cause issues if it runs pretty dry. Another thing on the same dealio with the HPOP is mainly for ZF6 trucks, the manual transmission 6.0s. These engines like high RPMs, but they don't like to be lugged. When you have a manual trans and a lot of people start in second, they think first is useless. Well, not necessarily on a 6.0, because they like high RPMs, and that's where they make power, and that's where they're happy at and they're balanced. On a lot of ZF6 trucks, you see cracked and or broken L-pops, or your low pressure oil pump. Those mainly break on ZF6 trucks just because they get lugged and it's producing so much torque and not enough power to balance it out that it does crack the low pressure oil pump. And then you can run into a slew of issues with high pressure oiling issues. And I would say one good thing about the 6.0 and 7.3s is their HUE injections. So their injectors are oil fired off of high pressure oil. Your truck won't run without oil pressure at all. It's not possible, because you're not creating fuel pressure if you don't have oil pressure. So you can never run these trucks out of oil, because they will shut off before it causes any damage, really. So that's one good thing that you don't have to worry about with these trucks. Third issue to attend to is going to be your standpipes and your dummy plugs. These trucks have, like I said, within the high pressure oil system, they do have standpipes and dummy plugs, and the O-rings on them tend to fail sometimes, and that creates a high pressure oil leak. And your truck will not start without high pressure oil, because it will not be able to create fuel pressure. So these trucks need to see at least 500 PSI through your ICP to be able to fire. If they don't see that, they won't fire. Make sure you check the truck for high pressure oil leaks. You can air test it through the IPR. You can air test it through the ICP. That's testing two different sides of the high pressure system. But if you have like a hot nose start, or a crank nose start even during hot weather, you can run into the issue of high pressure oil leaks. So, like I said, if you have a crank nose start or a hot nose start, check for high pressure oil leaks first. That'll be one of your main issues that causes your truck not to start. This is one of the biggest ones. There's really two big ones, and this is one of them. This truck was engineered to have 4 bolts per cylinder. And you look at really any other diesel and you're like, wow, that doesn't make any sense, because every other diesel is 6 bolts per cylinder, 2 on each side and 1 in the top and bottom. This one only has 2 on each side. In terms of clamping force, that's not great. And they did use head bolts, and those tend to stretch. And that's where this truck gets a really bad reputation of blowing head gaskets, is because it was engineered with 2 less bolts per cylinder. That's where all of the head gasket issues come from. You can combat this in a couple different ways. The main way to do it is to stud your truck. So get rid of head bolts and go for head studs. It is way easier to do head studs when you pull the cab. You can do it with the cab on. It's just going to take some wiggle room, taking off transmission, cross member, and transfer case support brackets, and jacking up the engine and stuff like that to be able to get enough force to get the bolts out. Because the rear driver side bolt you cannot get out unless you jack up the engine and twist it. So head studs is really one of the biggest things you need to do on these trucks. So my truck is studded, and I haven't had a single issue of any sort of oil in the coolant, any coolant in the combustion chambers, any of that. These trucks do have really good clamping force when you do head studs. But if you want to go even a step further, you can do O-ringed heads with head studs. And that will give you the best bang for your buck and never have to worry about a head gasket again. Unless you're pushing crazy power with 60 pounds of boost, it just is what it is. But that's one of the biggest ones, is 4 bolts per cylinder. It's just not engineered well at that point. One of the fifth thing is going to be your EGR, your emissions equipment on this truck. The EGR is cooled by coolant from your engine, and the stock ones tend to crack. And then you have coolant going into the exhaust area, you're burning coolant, and a lot of people will think if you have a cracked EGR, well, that you have a blown head gasket, because they're going to be pouring coolant out of it and it's going to be burning off, but it's not a head gasket, it's just a cracked EGR. And or your EGR valve is stuck, because what an EGR does is it's exhaust gas recirculation, and so it takes the exhaust gases and it puts them back into the intake. It cools it down first, and then it goes into the intake to get a more, like a cleaner burn. Thanks a lot, EPA. But that's one of the biggest ones, is an EGR. So to combat that, you pretty much have 2 options. You have a bulletproof diesel EGR that uses cylinder type cooling properties, so that the exhaust gas is cooled that way, and it's billet aluminum, so it rarely has any instances of cracking. Or you can delete it. But be careful deleting your trucks nowadays, because the EPA is cracking down on people, and I know 6.0s are on the chopping block. So if you live in a state that has crazy emissions requirements, tend to stay away from that unless you have off-road use, or unless your vehicle is mainly off-road use and is not governed by emissions. I would say one of the last and final things that is wrong with a 6.0 from the factory is the factory pressure spring in the fuel, your fuel regulator and your fuel bowl. Those tend to wear out pretty easily, and at wide open throttle, you'll drop fuel pressure, and that's an issue in its own, because you can blow a lot of things up if you run your truck too lean. So the factory fuel pressure spring wears out, it can break. A way to combat that, and a pretty cheap way at that, is to just get a blue spring kit. And obviously the spring is blue, that's why they call it that. It's just an updated fuel pressure spring, and it will maintain your fuel pressure at wide open throttle to around 60 to 65 psi, which is like a sweet spot, which is where you want to keep it at. So you can do a blue spring, Or another thing that I'm leaning towards is you can do a fast fuel system or an air dog, whichever you prefer. A fast system will enhance filtration and water separation. It'll also maintain a very solid fuel pressure, and you can set it to whatever you like, depending on your power goals. And they make so many different titanium series pumps, anywhere from stock power to 600 horsepower, 600 horsepower to 800, 800 to 1,000, and 1,000 up. So really you can do all that. But another thing that I would recommend is these trucks do have factory fuel pumps in them on some of them, unless you get a fast. Do a fuel sump, so it's pulling from the bottom of the tank, and the fast will be able to filter all that out. And then do a regulated return, so that you can regulate the amount of fuel pressure that's going back into your tank to reduce air bubbles and all of that stuff in there. I will end this video off saying I am not a 6-liter expert. I just have some experience in the field of 6.0s because I own one. Those are just the things that I've seen. I know there's probably more, but I hit on some of the major ones, and those are really the main problem things that you see with 6.0s. I don't regret buying my 6.0 at all. It's amazing. It has treated me so well. I've put a lot of work into it, but it is also just, it's a workhorse. They like high RPMs. They do really well towing, especially at high RPMs. And you just got to work them. You can't baby them. If you baby them, they're going to explode on their own. So use it for what it's meant for, and just have fun with it, because they're fun rigs once you get them dialed in. But with that, I think I'm going to end off the video here. I do want to know what you guys think of the 6-liter. I'm kind of biased because I own one, obviously, and I love it. It literally has one of the best sounding exhaust notes out of a diesel, in my opinion. I mean, a lot of them sound great. I do love a 5.9, a P-pumped 5.9, 12 valve. They sound phenomenal. That is a dream of mine, to have a P-pumped 12 valve. And who knows, maybe if the 6.0 goes 6 feet under, maybe we put a 12 valve 5.9 in it and have a Fummins. But that's later on down the road. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If there is anything that I missed, please let me know. But that's just the main things that I've seen with my experience. So I'm curious on your guys' thoughts and opinions. With that being said, I'm going to wrap it up right here, and I will catch you guys in the next video. See ya.